This episode of the FireDawg Podcast is supported by Roll Call Coins. Founded by a 24-year Air Force firefighter veteran, they understand that a coin represents more than just an event. It represents a story. Using 3D modeling and custom textures, Roll Call has moved beyond generic designs to create premium, standout coins. Whether you're honoring a department or branding a business, they make the process effortless. Start your design today at rollcallcoins.com and let your coin stand out in the stack. This episode of the FireDawg Podcast is supported by AOS Services, the one-stop shop for firefighting equipment compliance built for the DoD. At AOS Services, they help military fire departments stay mission-ready with customized programs that bundle everything from SCBAs and compressors to hoses, ladders, PPE care, rescue gear, and more. Their teams work worldwide, so whether you're stateside or overseas, they've got you covered. For all your firefighting equipment compliance needs, visit aosservicesinc.com to learn more.
This is the FireDawg Podcast.
The views and opinions presented on today's episode are those of the speaker and do not necessarily represent the views of the Department of Defense or the United States Air Force.
Welcome, my name is Matt Wilson, and thank you for listening to episode 65 of the FireDawg Podcast. Every fire department has incidents that shape its identity, the calls that become part of the culture, the stories that get told to every new recruit, the events that fundamentally change how a department trains, equips itself, and prepares for the future. At Vandenberg Air Force Base, now Vandenberg Space Force Base, that defining moment came in 1977 when the Honda Canyon fire tore through the installation and became one of the most significant wildfire events in the base's history. Nearly 40 years later, another major wildfire would again challenge the installation, the 2016 Canyon fire, demonstrating the immense scale and complexity that wildfire can bring to even the most experienced departments. Today, we're going to walk through both of those incidents, the magnitude of the events, the leadership lessons, how they shape the department, and what they still teach us about leadership, preparation, and survival on the fire ground. To help tell that story, we're joined by someone who has spent decades studying and sharing these events. It is my pleasure to welcome to the podcast Chief Mark Smith. Well, Chief Smith, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on. I know that you've given your brief on the 1977 Honda Canyon and the 2016 Canyon fires at Vandenberg. I believe you've done it at the Senior Fire Officer Summit. I know that I was in a briefing where I was in a talking crash where you'd given the brief, and I'm glad that we could get you on to record this. Maybe not the entire brief, we're not going through slides, but
right.
Just to talk about it so that we can archive this conversation because, man, some really cool perspectives that you have. The fact that you were in the department in 77 and in 2016 when these two fires happened, and of course the fatalities in 77, and then the near miss in 2016. A lot to go through, so I'm excited to talk to you today.
I'm excited to put this together or to be able to do this for you. Just to clarify, I was not in the department in 77.
Sorry about that.
We spent extensive time studying that fire.
Okay.
Once I got on had the opportunity to run the Vandenberg hotshot crew. It was kind of one of our missions to study that fire, utilize that fire as a teaching tool. That presentation at Crashing Talks and at the Senior Fire Officer Summit was accumulation of years of study, a book written, and even a documentary that's out now. Not that I put those two together, the book or the documentary, but it's a part of that development. So to be able to make sure that the lessons of both of those fires are not forgotten is very important to me. It's kind of a highlight of my career to make sure I can pass that on.
Certainly a large body of work, and sorry for mistaking that. I don't know why I thought you were there in 77. I thought I heard you say that in the talking crash, but maybe it was sometime shortly after?
I got assigned to Vandenberg in 91.
91? Okay.
As a buck sergeant when that rank existed.
Nice. That's cool. You might be our first buck sergeant guest. Okay. Well, either way, there's a large body of work, as you mentioned. There's a lot of studying of that event.
Yeah.
I think. Do you think that? So it was really kind of a paradigm shift from kind of what I've gathered in how Vandenberg and maybe even the state of California, because I know that was a big decade for the state of California in
It was.
national incident management and things like that. And then there's these fatalities at Vandenberg. So would you characterize that event as kind of a paradigm shift for Vandenberg?
Massively so. It changed how the department looked at wildland fire, embraced. Today, Air Force Fire Protection recognizes wildland fire as a competency of our firefighters. But when I came in 85, it was 86. It was just, I think it was a one-day lesson at the tech school, and it wasn't looked at as a core competency, nor really recognized. And Vandenberg, over 100,000 acres, vegetation that is meant to burn. It's a part of the nature and the way it's designed. And then we're trying to launch rockets and have electrical lines and infrastructure all embedded through these canyons. And Vandenberg's not a flat piece of dirt. We have mountains to the north and mountains to the south. And that's where we're doing all of our rocket and missile launches.
What a unique place Vandenberg
So the department transitioned to recognizing it needed a crew. It actually hired University of California, Berkeley, and they came down and did a study. And their recommendation out of that was to a wildland hand crew that was doing vegetation management and trying to prevent future large-scale wildfires through prescribed fire.
Yeah, what a unique place. And reading through your brief and some other things, and talking to some folks there, it is much more geographically large than what I was thinking.
Yeah.
It's a very spread. It's a big place.
It is.
And of course, not a lot of that is inhabited, which means there's a higher risk profile for wildland fires. And then of course, the challenging terrain, as you mentioned, It's not a flat piece of land. And then you have the ocean that you border, which I imagine brings some winds and some other weather events that makes things even more challenging.
Yeah, one of the meteorologists that I dealt with when I was doing the prescribed fire program, when I'd call California Air Resource Board to talk to see if we'd have a burn day or not a burn day, he says, predicting weather at Vandenberg is extremely difficult because we do jet out. Vandenberg is located in that corner of California, that little elbow. That entire coastline, above and below that elbow, 42 miles of that is Vandenberg. So jetting out into the ocean, it could be raining on North Vandenberg and sunny on South Vandenberg around that corner. That's pretty rare and unique. And we only get rain in the winter months. The summer is completely dry.
Okay. It doesn't seem, I don't know, it doesn't seem like a good mix when you put space launch rockets next to an environment like that. But
and then they put it right next to a canyon. So their flame buckets don't just go out into flat ground. Their flame buckets go right into a canyon. So so when something does go flying out of that flame bucket, it's going to the other side of the canyon and then it's running uphill.
Man, what a unique place. And I know I've said that, but it really is unique, and it's the wildland risk there. And then of course the capabilities of the department because of that. I do want to get into those capabilities, but before we start, I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself, tell the listeners, I know you've already alluded to it, how long you've been in, positions you've served, maybe other places you've served, and whatever else you'd like to share about your career.
Okay. Yes, I grew up in Ohio and in high school aspired to be a firefighter and joined the local volunteer department. I was the young kid in the department and was encouraged by those members to join the military to be a firefighter if that's how I truly wanted to do it. It was very difficult to get into any fire department back in 85. So joined the Air Force. My first assignment was to Castle Air Force Base in California. Was there for 2 years, and then I volunteered to go remote, being single, hearing about Alaska and the different remotes they had at the time, Clear, Shimia, and then there was one other, King Salmon, I believe it was. I thought it'd be really neat to do that, and my ultimate goal was to go over to England. I wanted to see Europe, but being young and naive, I wanted to go to English-speaking countries, so I didn't feel that far out of place. Got assigned to Shimia, spent a year there. At that point, I was a senior airman. Then went to RAF Bentwaters is a follow-on. And it's 2 years there. Met my wife, who was in the Air Force as well. We got married. We were trying to put in for the East Coast. We're both East Coasters, and they gave us Vandenberg. So we're back in California. She was at March at her first base. Then got here. At that point, I was a buck sergeant and made staff while I was here. I was my rescue was kind of my dream job. I think a lot of firefighters it is. Loved it. Loved it at our Bentwaters, especially with the A-10s. That's where, when I was that our Bentwaters Desert Storm broke out. So I get this to Vandenberg, and within about a year and a half, I was asked, do I want to go over the crew? I asked our assistant chief at the time was asking me, what does that mean? Am I going over just for the academy for the 2 weeks or 3 weeks? Am I going over for just the fire season, or am I going over, as a permanent member of the overhead of the crew? And he goes, once you go over, you'll never come back. Because the folks that go over love the job so much they never want to come back, and did not realize how true that statement was, because I went over, worked the initiative of getting the crew from laborers to actually GS firefighters, because there's no promotion potential from the crew to the department. The DoD certification system wasn't in place at that time. We converted. I ended up getting orders short notice to, well, they weren't short notice, just the MPF, our orderly room wasn't picking up the orders. So they'd been sitting for a while. So I had orders to Goodfellow. And when I got a call from my sponsor, not knowing I had orders, I asked him, am I going to the fire school or am I going to the department? He goes, I take it you're a non-vol. So they didn't have anybody to take over the crew. I was a staff sergeant running the crew with another military member, and most of them either got deployed or PCS. So I didn't have a number two, and the rest were all seasonal firefighters. So they converted the position to civilian. I applied for it. At 10:30 in the morning, I was asked if I wanted the job. At 3:30, I was re-enlisting for 6 years and going to Goodfellow. So I turned down that assignment and took that civilian position, continued to run the crew up until 2006. So I got out in 98, and then 2006 left the crew, lateraled from that position running the crew to battalion chief on South Vandenberg, and then promoted to assistant chief and retired in that position, and was brought back out of retirement to help with succession planning our department. We had a massive turnover of all of our chiefs and nobody ready to step up.
Quite the career path there, and a lot of time spent at Vandenberg. When you'd mention crew, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it here soon, you're talking about the hotshot crew.
The hotshot crew. Today it's we call it the hand crew. We don't use the term hotshot. That certification was lost with sequestration. We lost the crew for 7 years. And then bringing the crew back, they have to go back through a recertification process.
I understand.
And it's very difficult. You have to maintain certain standards within the crew, right. And a portion of that is overhead. And until we can rebuild that overhead and consistency, and the crew's out, the crew technically has to be out on fires to get that, to meet that standard.
Exactly.
So it's a type 2, what they call IA, initial attack hand crew.
Okay.
Very well respected within their peers.
Yeah.
And many hotshot crews, when I was on when we were a hotshot crew and I was running the crew, there were only 28 crews in the country, and it was well respected. And then when there was a need for more crews, they kind of gutted those 28, and some of those captains and squad bosses went to help develop those other crews. So now there's a standard where a hotshot crew could be a hotshot crew 1 year, next year they're type 2 IA because they don't meet the standard.
So for listeners understanding, type 1 would be the hotshot crew, right?
Yes.
So that name is associated with the type 1 crew, type 1 hand crew.
Yes, it's associated with type 1 crew. The CAL FIRE and other agencies will designate something a type 1. It's a capability.
Right.
But the title hotshot crew is based on a stringent requirement that you meet to get that title and put that title on your crew.
And we're talking about physical requirements, abilities to do your pack test in a certain amount of time, and different exercise, different kind of activities, right? Digging a line with time requirements, correct?
Yes. So to explain what a hotshot crew or even a hand crew is. They're they're put together to be a fire asset, no different than an engine, no different than a bulldozer or a tractor plow for the East Coast. And so they're a tool. It's you can the mindset, not to sound elitist or anything, but a hotshot crew is like a special forces crew in a sense that as firefighters we multidisciplined. We're hazmat, rescue, this, that, and the other. The crew focuses solely on their mission. So they're very, very good at it. And they have many tools they can bear to the fire, burning, putting fire to fire, that kind of thing, and working in a very extreme terrain and doing it safely and making sure at the end of the day, everybody comes out. Because we've all, if you haven't seen Only the Brave, it's other than a couple of glorified Hollywood things, it's a very, very excellent movie that really, I think, did justice to what a crew is.
Yeah. And that Prescott crew is, they perished in a fire in Arizona.
Yes.
They were also a Type 1 hand crew.
They were. And they like us, that story is very, very similar to our story in the sense of when, again, like I mentioned, our crew was actually embraced by the Los Padres hotshot crew. Mark Linane ran that crew. He was I would consider him one of the godfathers of wildland firefighting, and every crew superintendent highly respected him. And he kind of he brought me under his wing and helped us, develop our crew, and also brought us into the fold of, working alongside those other crews. So we were respected from that aspect of, through him. He mentored me. But again, not to sound elitist, the crew does a very specialized aspect of wildland fire, that their physical fitness has to be top notch. They're working in extremely arduous terrain, 16 plus hours a day, sleeping in the dirt. Many times they call it coyote tactics, where you're staying on the fire line and you're being resupplied either by a vehicle bringing stuff out to the fire, a helicopter flying, slinging in additional supplies to sustain us for multiple days. Even pack mules bringing stuff in, depending on where we're at. I did 7 days of coyote tactics on a fire. That it was a highlight of my time with the crew, where every day we'd pack up our sleeping bags into a sling and they'd haul them off, and as well as the meals we had just eaten. And then that night they'd sling it into wherever we were going to bed down for that night. So again, working extreme heat, up close to the fire, and very, very arduous terrain.
Yeah. I'm glad that you're going through the details of what being a hotshot crew, Type 1 hand crew entails, because I think that people that don't maybe understand wildland firefighting, no fault of their own, maybe they haven't been exposed to it, may not understand. It's hard to put in perspective.
Right.
What it takes to get to that level. It's incredibly special. I think because, like you mentioned, 28 crews in the United States, that's unbelievable. In some of the bigger states that have a higher risk profile for wildland firefighting, maybe there's a couple. I was in Alaska. I think there's 2. That's pretty. And we're talking about what, 30 guys maybe in some cases.
They have up the numbers, and I want to say they're like trying to push 24, 25, or even 30.
Okay.
But the official number back in the day was no less than 18.
Okay.
And then most crews ran 21. There are Type 1 crews. CAL FIRE considers their crews Type 1, and they run 15 and 15 for a total of 30. Okay. We run 10 and 10 in each, crew buggy, and then the superintendent. But they're trying to up those numbers for rotation of maybe members and keeping that crew intact, and then giving some time for R&R, and also be able to stay back and serve their home station. Those 28 crews were managed through the National Emergency Fire Center, that they kind of owned them, even though they were stationed at, like, let's say in Los Padres. So if they needed to move them, they'd move them. We were never a part of that. We stayed mostly in California. It was hard to sell our crew going out of state when we're really here to take care of Vandenberg.
Right.
But going out to those agencies is what made us capable of handling what needed to be done at Vandenberg. It was kind of a delicate balance that I had to manage as a crew superintendent.
Understand that.
But to tie it back to the fire, my time on that crew, we wanted to know what happened in 1977. We started studying it. And it was a huge epiphany to me when we were showing the documentary on the 77 fire. And as I was introducing Dennis and Joe Valencia, Dennis Ford, he put the documentary together. Joe Valencia wrote the book, Beyond Tranquillian Ridge. As we were introducing that to our department, I said that the study of this fire is what prepared me as the IC and made me capable of kind of handling an out of control fire that we couldn't do a thing to, which was the Canyon Fire in 2016. So it's like, wow. I mean, all that work that we did, um, paid off for that day that now I have that fire scenario.
Yeah.
And that was the goal, was to make sure that if we had another fire scenario like we had in 77, how would we manage it to make sure that didn't happen again?
Right. Gosh, there's so much that I want to get into. And I look forward to the stuff that we do get into. I want to, before we do start highlighting 77, I figure we highlight 77 first. Just chronologically, It makes sense, right? And then 2016. But before we do that, you talked about the hot shot capability that Vandenberg once had, and they're working their way towards maybe doing the same thing, but they are a Type 2 hand crew, which is, again, highly respected.
Right.
There's a whole lot of experience in that department, in the state, in the area, for wildland firefighting. So, nobody's questioning the capability of Vandenberg. But I want to talk about the wildland capability, the broader wildland capability of Vandenberg.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So the crew was birthed out of that 77 fire. Like, you have a need, you have to manage the vegetation, you need to do this. So they started off with doing wildland training for the entire department, but then they took members of the department and said, if we have a fire, you're going to be a crew. Within a couple of years, right around, I think, 81, they started hiring overhires. So every year we have an academy, and back in the day, Don Perry taught that academy. He was the battalion chief, and if you read Beyond Tranquillian Ridge or you watch the documentary, you'll learn more about him. But he was very pivotal in becoming a portion of running the 77 fire when we lost our base commander, fire chief, and assistant chief. So he started helping us teach that academy, and I don't know that every member in our department went through that academy. The crew certainly did. When I came on, or got assigned to Vandenberg in, when was that? 91. I went through, when I was asked to go to the crew, I went through the academy for the first time. We would send members over, not necessarily every single member. Once we adopted the NWCG standards, and those courses became more, the robust to where they are today, the 130 firefighter, wildland firefighter, 190 fire behavior, we adopted all that. I was going to classes all over California, and we took those classes and redeveloped that academy. We didn't call it the Hotshot Academy, we called it the Wildland Academy. Every member from our newly assigned military deputy chief in our department will go through that academy. It's, we consider it the basic fundamentals of making sure that you're safe on Vandenberg, because if you're even going out to a fire, there's the risk of the fire overtaking you. So we run everybody through that every year. Of course, we changed tools that we put on the engine, and making sure we have shovels and McLeods and Pulaskis. I think those were already on there back in the day. But we teach firefighters how to use them. It's not just that 1 hour or whatever it was in Goodfellow that and there is the concern we have of newly assigned military member, or even we pick up a civilian that doesn't have wildland training, that if we get a fire, so we'll leave them at the engine if that's the case, if they haven't had that core fundamental training, and have them help the engineer and help reservice the engine, but not take them out in the fire line if they haven't done shelter training, this, that, and that. We have over the years acquired, for me, it was a challenge trying to acquire the right vehicles to transport our crew. There's pictures in the documentary and such of what we had as a crew buggy, and then I finally got those. And then we have we were one of the few departments, I think Cannon did the same thing back in the day, before there was an actual wildland engine that was acquirable through the Air Force, fire protection. So we went out and got 2 Type 3 fire engines, which is a wildland capable engine, 4x4, a little more compact than our Type 1 engines that we use for everyday structural firefighting. So we have that. Well, then we also, we had dozer operators that would help on fires in the past, before 77. But again, the approach to the fire, not that they weren't trained and everything else, it just wasn't as robust as it is today. I don't want to discredit pre-77
No, I understand what you're
firefighters that
saying.
they didn't know what they were doing.
Right.
That's not the case. It
We
just
just
was the
learned a
mentality.
lot.
Right.
We just learned a lot collectively as a fire service, probably.
Right. And it was the Cold War era. So we had commanders, and our whole thing was the war, and being postured. But we also had this vegetation that we're trying to do to do our mission in. So we got the 2 Type 3 engines, and then we've been a part of the development of. We went to Cannon. We helped them. They were losing 13 firefighters, and they had their range. And how we do wildland fire in the Air Force is very unique. You go East Coast, and it's the environmental Jackson Guard. Those folks are managing and dealing with the vegetation wildland fire. You come to more to the West Coast, and the West Coast bases are the firefighters are taking care of it, not the environmental flight. And even the middle of the country, I've been around the world with Guam, and such, to where it's a little unique to where you go and how you fight fire. But the department as a whole, I don't want to digress too much from our topic, but when we lost the crew through sequestration, when they killed all the overhires throughout the Air Force, so we had 7 funded positions, so we kind of had this caretaker status. So what are we going to do? And we kept fighting the fight to get them back. And the Canyon fire in 2016 was a nexus to bring them back. But we had several fires where we had some near misses, where the fire turned and somebody could have been hurt, or we could have damaged and burned equipment. And as I'm looking at our roster for the day, and this is where I really got our commander's attention, and he's like, I get it. I can sell this. What would happen is we hire these crew members. They go on the crew. They fight fire around the state. They build up that experience, not just the training, but the experience, and then they promote into the department. And now they're a firefighter, an engineer, and even a captain. And for me, the assistant chief, battalion chief, I'm also a operations section chief type, on a type 2 team. They don't have type 2 and 1 teams anymore, but I've served in that capacity and have that qualification. It's only because of my time through that process. So we were losing that experience, and we were getting back to kind of that 1977 capability where you got firefighters that have no wildland experience, and now they're going to go out and experience something they never experienced in their life, and a fast-moving fire pushed by wind and potential that could kill them. And on that fire, that when I took the commander out there and showed him where we had a near miss, and I showed him the roster. There were only 3 of us out of 20-some firefighters or initial attack on that fire that had any real large fire experience. So we turned that tide, and we have our crew back, and it's a concern when we hire, and it's a concern in making sure through succession that we continue to feed our department with members with experience.
It's an unfortunate problem as old as time. It takes tragedy to ignite change, no pun intended. But 77, we learned from that. We build up through the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and hey, it hasn't been a problem for a while. I haven't seen anything happen. Why do you need these people? We're concerned about Vandenberg, not the greater California area. Maybe you don't need all this.
We're dealing with that right now, even with our launch tempo. They want to increase the launch tempo. Yeah. We're saying, okay, we need a certain number of firefighters on duty, a certain amount of time to reset from one launch to the next launch. And they're like, what is the big deal? Because the recency. Right. And then we had a conversation yesterday, and I said, let's go back. I said, the problem is we're 10 years from 2016. Yeah. We were 10 years from the Canyon fire. Right. So the Canyon fire shut down our launch capability for 6 months. We can't afford that. And when our posturing for launch is not necessarily protect the rocket, we're not going to be able to protect the rocket. If something happens to the rocket, it happens. It's making sure that we then are able to respond and take care of whatever happened with that rocket to make sure the infrastructure, personnel first, obviously, and not to get into all the space business, but how we do launches has changed, and there's a life threat, and life threat in the sense of we're not doing high risk operations since we're threatening people's lives. But if a fire occurs, we got to be postured and be able to respond and mitigate that situation in a very timely manner. Because the canyon fire was in one of those places that when it started and I was driving, I knew immediately this was going to go for days. It was in a canyon, it's inaccessible, and it's going to develop before we can even get to a point where we can get to the edge of this fire. And there's areas on the base like that that's kind of like, we're in for the long haul because you can see where the smoke's coming from.
It's, again, a problem as old as time, and it's just the never-ending job of a chief officer, executive officer to just articulate that risk and just drive home the importance of this stuff and to help others understand, external stakeholders understand that just because it hasn't happened, the law of recency, we as humans, like, hey, if it hasn't happened, then it's not a problem. Just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean it won't happen. It won't have a huge impact, and there couldn't, there may be loss of infrastructure in life. And so we kind of constantly have to beat that drum, unfortunately, but that's just kind of the nature of the business. And then space operations has just since 2016, I would assume there's a larger emphasis. I mean, now we have the Space Force. There's a whole lot more things going on in the space domain. And so I'm sure the mission set at Vandenberg is probably expanded to a degree, or at least launches have expanded. I mean, I don't want to talk about the specifics of that, of course, but the risk profile, potentially.
It's extreme. It went from a launch every month or every other month to every 4 days. We're doing over 100 launches a year, and it's going to increase. That's all, public knowledge. Okay. So the tempo's increased dramatically, and the entire way we do business has changed significantly just in the last 2 years. We used to do this massive standbys, all sit in one location for 3 hours prior to launch, and we can't afford to do that anymore. It depleted the entire department to support that, so we have to be extremely strategic and extremely smart in how we do it, but not let our guard down to make it seem like it's a routine, like it's an aircraft taking off and landing, because it's not. It's when something does go wrong, and it does. I mean, recency. If you look at the Cape, a Falcon 9, blew up on the pad. We haven't had that here, thankfully, but we have had major. Just in the last 10 years, we had a Minotaur explode on the ground as it was trying to take off, and we had a Firefly where they did a destruct, and it didn't cause any wildfires on the base, but it rained down debris within what they expected, the ILL, the impact limit line area. So we had. It's not if, it's just when.
Right.
We're pushing. We're not. I wouldn't say we're pushing the limits, but we're challenging ourselves to change the technology. And SpaceX has done a great job of that, of bringing technology to bear to a whole new level that allows us to do what we're doing today. As a kid, I watched Splash Gordon. Did I ever imagine that as an adult, I'd be standing watching the first landing at Vandenberg look just like Flash Gordon? The legs came out and the rocket set down on the pad.
That's incredible.
That was amazing.
It is.
So anyway.
It really is. Well, we certainly set the scene, Chief Smith. We talked a lot about the capabilities of Vandenberg and, your history. Let's get into 1977 Honda Canyon fire. Start wherever you think is appropriate. Talk to me about that event.
So 77, right before roll call. So you got crews ready to go home and crews coming on. It's right before Christmas. The high wind event, which happens here, typically April. The time frame we're in right now is our high wind time, where extreme winds blow. But they had a very interesting thing where they have a high pressure system, low pressure system set up, and as we're familiar with certain areas of the country, the Santa Anas you hear in California, up north, the mono winds and stuff like that. Those don't typically hit us at Vandenberg. They're further south. So they start like in Santa Barbara and work their way all the way down to San Diego as they get into the Sundowners and the Santa Ana winds. But that had happened, and then as that was breaking up, it set up the perfect storm for us. And we are again in the corner of California. Bakersfield is to the east of us. Got hit with gale force winds, and those winds recorded over 100 miles an hour, I can't remember the exact number, 130, whatever, when the wind vane thing that is tracking the winds at Transpeak broke. Well, power pole was sheared off from the winds and started a vegetation fire in Honda Canyon up near the ridge top. And It started off shelter, and I've been out there before on a windy day where you could be kind of sheltered from the wind. Doesn't feel like a windy day, but you're up on that ridge and you can't even open a door without it getting of the vehicle without it getting ripped out of your hands. So I believe that's kind of the scenario what they dealt with when they were doing initial attack on the fire. So that they're responding out. They immediately called for Santa Barbara County's response as well. So that brought Don Perry, who was a battalion chief, and a strike team of engines, which is 5 engines, and their hand crew. The power pole's broken. There's a fire. There's an engine trying to fight the fire. We didn't have progressive hose line packs at the time. They're trying to catch the fire, and we have our first burnover. The winds change. They turn, and that pushes the fire back uphill. And they took shelter on the backside. Nobody was hurt, but the engine was severely damaged. The fire then is down in the canyon. Chief Perry is now met up with I'm going to keep it really short. If folks want to know like all the real specific details, get Joe Valencia's book, Beyond Tranquility Ridge. I think it's available on Amazon. And I'm not here to try and push book sales. And also
Push it.
Also on all this major streaming is the documentary.
Yeah, I noticed it was on YouTube. So
yeah, Firestorm
for free
is the name of the name of the documentary.
Firestorm 77.
Firestorm 77. Yes, thank you. Keep the whole scenario, but we had 7, I believe it was 7 burnover incidents. Like each one of those incidents would be what you call an incident within incident, would be a traumatic event on any fire, but we had 7 of them, and then one was obviously fatal. So the incident commander, the fire chief, the installation commander at the time, the base commander, he'd already done his change of command, but it's like, this is my base, I'm leaving it, but so he comes out and he meets up with Chief Bell, and they're concerned because there is a hazardous storage facility in Honda Canyon near the mouth of it where it comes out near the ocean. But it's far enough back in there they were trying to drive in to see if it's going to be threatened by fire. So fire's up on a ridge. They're a mile and a half away near the ocean, just up above the ocean. And that fire works its way down into the canyon. And they had a lookout that said, hey, that fire's making a run. So at this point, the Joe Linneman, who ran the Santa Barbara County crew, is there. Their Chief Perry, a dozer just got offloaded. They're getting to try and widen the break on the other side of the canyon from where it started. That dozer transport gets stuck. So the dozer helps push it out of the way, but they realize they need to evacuate where they met. That's the part that always puzzled me. It's like, they're a mile and a half away from the fire. How could they, when the fire starts moving, how could they get caught by that fire? It's like they were leaving as soon as they knew that things had changed. That fire just shotgunned out of that canyon towards the ocean. And the path that they needed to take to get down below, it was a gravel, asphalt, broken up kind of road that was drivable, a little bit sand on either side. Chief Perry was the dozer transport was the first one to get out, and the dozer operator's in the dozer, so he's coming out. But so the order of events was the dozer transport goes flying out. The whole strike team of engines from Santa Barbara County, a whole bunch of folks are down below. They see the dozer transport come out, tractor with a trailer, and all the hydraulic lines are burned off of it. It's smoking. And then Chief Perry's coming out, and he can't see the road, and his vehicle gets stuck on the side of the road in the sand. Chief Bell and the base commander and the assistant chief all pull up alongside, maybe went a little bit past them, and then backed up because they couldn't get out. The fire was overrunning the road now. Their vehicle was found further up the road, closer back to the camera pad where they all met up when it was found. It was in drive, parking brake set, doors open. That's how it was found, and it was in fairly good shape. The grill had been melted, which I believe is when they pulled up towards the fire, and the gumball lights back in the day that were up on top of the emergency lights on top were melted down a little bit, but the rest of the vehicle was in perfect shape because where they were at, the fire burned over the top of the vehicle because they're kind of in a cut bank, which is one of those things we look at when we're looking at survivable sites. And we use that as a lesson. That's like, if you were caught by a fire, where's a good place to take shelter and possibly deploy? So again, using that kind of as a lesson. No one will ever know why they got out of the vehicle, why they went where they went. Where they were at, you could see the road down below. It's a long haul. It looks close. It's kind of that deceiving thing, right? The ocean's right there. There's a road right there, and I'm up here. It looks close. It's not. They traveled that way, but where we found them was there's a fence line that came off 45 that went into another small canyon. And so they went down this break. There's no way they went straight to where they were found because the vegetation was way too thick. Because when we started looking for the fatality site, because nobody knew where it was, that was lost over the years. But there was a picture that showed this fence post that was burned, and it had this weird and it was angled, and you could see the ocean, you could see the topography. So we found the fatality site. So we believe they went down that break, the three of them. They caught that fence line because the fire turned. As soon as it got out of the canyon, it's now all the coastline, still a little hilly, but it's shotgunned south and north. So now it's running in front of where they're going to be able to go. So they followed we believe followed the fence line, and that's where they were found, burned over. The bodies were found, but it was quite a while before it was realized that they were gone. So now you have the incident commander that's running the incident, deceased, the assistant chief that was helping support fighting the fire, and then the base commander, all gone. There's nobody running the fire anymore. Don Perry has to be rescued, deployed. So the dozer supervisor was in his vehicle, Joe Lindeman, and he were all in his vehicle. They had fire shelters. We did not have fire shelters. They weren't mandatory. They were not bought for the department at that time, but the crew had. Santa Barbara County's crew did. So that they deployed a shelter and survived in the vehicle. That vehicle was massively burned over. Tires burned off. It was a steel vehicle. It was survivable to stay in. Another lesson learned. We talk about survivability of vehicles. Our engines are made with plastics, this, that, and the other. You sit up high. So we use that as a lesson learned as well. So fast forward, they rescue them. They're looking for the dozer operator because he was the third one out. They did see him try and get off the dozer as the fire's burning him over and try and take shelter, and the dozer's walking away. And that's the last they saw him. They did use ropes. Imagine the winds are still howling to the point where they're taking sand and they're blowing sand up against what just burned, and it's sandblasting the scar off of it. So where the wind's blowing, you have completely ashen skeletons of brush and trees and such, that it's now white on one side because the wind is blowing that hard. The power lines are basically doing jump rope circles. So smoke, they're trying to find him. They do find him. He's in the dozer tracks, and he's taken to Walter Reed Burn Center, flown out, medevac. I always get the number of days, but he did pass days later, 9 days later, in the hospital. So we lost, our dozer operator Clarence McCauley, Assistant Chief Eugene Cooper, Chief Bell, and Colonel Turner, our base commander. Don Perry ends up kind of running things to the south of that incident, and Chief Holmes, who's inspector, starts running the north side. And they're being now challenged by General Gray. Doesn't want fire on the base. We got enough fire, and Chief Perry's like, we have to burn around all this infrastructure. Slick 6 at the time, which was the space shuttle complex, we were ready to launch that here back in the 80s, was the mole project back then. So it was a active launch site with all the chemicals that go along with that launch, and they're worried that the fire is going to impact that. So he managed the south side. Chief Holmes managed the north side. They're bringing in Army, Navy Seabees with massive amounts of dozers. We're trying to do a stand to keep this fire from going to the north part of the base. 2 days later, it starts raining, and essentially helps put the fire out. There were again other burnovers. Crews fighting fire. Fire jumped the road. It flashed up, and the burn injuries and impalement. We're trying to protect the Titan launch complex. Highly, highly sensitive. Cold War. We're launching out of Titan. You had to do a retina scan, you had to do PIN, and had to have a line badge to get into that site. It's, for all intents and purposes, top secret site. That's the culture of the base at the time too that we're dealing with. You're bringing off base firefighters on, and they're in that site trying to protect it and rescue a member of an engine. They're trying to go out, trying to save themselves as the fire is overrunning that site, and he's on the side of an engine. They're all just jumping on the engine to get out of there, and the driver's trying to time the exit through that gate as the wind's blowing it open and closed, and that big locking hatch that goes around the pole and slides down in the hole, that impaled him in the leg. peeled them off the engine. So we had that injury. So again, there were 7 of those occurrences of dozers being over. Charlie Moore, who was our dozer, ran our dozer program for years, and was overran by fire. It wasn't killed, wasn't hurt, but a lot of burnover incidents occurred. And eventually there was kind of a management, Chief Perry being the most instrumental, most experienced, helping get that fire under control. But ultimately, what put the fire out? It rained 2 days later.
Yeah. Wow. Unbelievable. Thank you so much for walking us through that. I know that it's probably tough every time you do. It's just, man, what a dramatic event. 7 burnovers and impalement, fatalities, just unbelievable. But so many lessons learned from that event. So let's talk a little bit about that. Like what, I caught that, now there's more of an emphasis on training. Of course, in 81, the hotshot crew was established, more of an emphasis on equipment, shelters, communications, even fuels management. I read there was one other thing that I found interesting was that and I know it's just a consequence of the era, the base commander being involved. And I'd read also that base augmentees were leveraged for wildland fire back in that day. And that ceased in about 95.
I was the one still training them, and I was like, "Why are we doing this? We'd bring mutual aid to bear. We would never use this program. Yeah. Can we please terminate this program?"
Yeah, it's just too high hazard to expect to throw somebody with a shovel that has no idea about wildland behavior or anything like that, right?
So going back again, Cold War era, right? This fire in the minds of the General Gray and the leadership is this is no different than war. We're going to fight this thing and we're going to put it out. They rounded up people and put them on buses. They rounded up our military members, went to the dorms, knocked the dorms, put them on buses, handed them these tools, and told them to go. And part of the documentary of Dennis Ford putting it together is he was never a firefighter. He was an airman. And he was sent out there, and he was traumatized. His group of, I think, 10 folks were just left. They ended up hiking out the next day many miles to get back to one of the fire stations where they got picked up. And so when he retired, he went to Alan Hancock and was looking for something to do and decided to go into film. And they had to do a project, and he wanted to do this story. That's what kind of led to that. And then I met him for coffee one day because somebody told me he was looking for this, and there was many firefighters they were interviewing that were still dealing with PTSD from 77. So not to again to digress off of our topic, but what was really cool about that whole meeting was we brought all, for lack of a better word, and probably a good statement, the survivors of that fire that they were interviewing all back. And part of the documentary is filming us, taking what we learned from that fire. We created a staff ride. So we'd been doing the staff ride. Dennis didn't know we were doing that staff ride, nor did many of the people that were impacted by that fire. So we brought them all back and we ran them through the staff ride. And so they contributed to the storytelling of what happened. And the staff ride is not meant to be storytelling, a history lesson. It's meant to make you feel like you were there. But okay, now you're posed with this problem. What would you do today? Not criticize what they did then, but what would you do today? Right. But through their storytelling of what they experienced, it just made that tenfold better. But it was also a great peer support intervention. Yeah, and it connected them. So they now have a connection to their folks.
Yeah.
That were there and can able to offer peer support to one another from then on. So yeah, it was pretty powerful. A very, very powerful day.
Yeah, incredible stuff. That's right. I forgot about the staff ride, and you mentioned that in the brief that I sat through. So what an awesome thing to do. Just lesson learned, not to criticize what's going on, but to learn from it and to not repeat history, of course. That's why we review events like this, incidents like this. What's
interesting is Joe Valencia wrote the book Beyond Tranquility Ridge. He's not a firefighter. He was a reserve firefighter back in the day, but that wasn't his career path. Dennis Ford did a documentary, Firestorm 77. He was not a firefighter. Yeah. So both of them contributing very much to something very, very needed for firefighters that deal with wildland, because they're not just lessons for us here at Vandenberg. They're out there. They're in the leadership, the wildland leadership lessons learned site. Like the information's out there to be used. And I've done staff rides for entire forests. Their district comes out, their leadership, and I've ran them through. We've done, I couldn't tell you how many self-rides we've done, but
Right.
we don't do them just for our department. We do them for everyone in
Excellent.
the fire communities, and we tie them to some of the classes, the safety officer class and such.
Yeah. Man, I just think about using augmentees and what a coordination nightmare that has to be.
Oh yeah.
Just
And they're
send
being
people out with
dumped
a
on the
shovel
fire
and-
captains. Imagine you're a captain on an engine. You're not an assistant chief. You're not a battalion chief. And it's like,
Yeah.
here's these 10 people. Well,
Yeah,
the
use 'em.
captain's looking for leadership on, like, well, what are we doing with this fire right now? Because nobody's on the
Yeah.
radio, telling us, directing us. There was a lot of independent action going on all around the fire because
Yeah,
nobody was coordinating a leadership effort because they were killed early on the incident.
Right.
And now these buses are showing up, and
With
you got these,
untrained people.
and the culture's changed. You don't typically have
so much.
commanders coming out to a fire and getting involved in the firefight, but you had them all over the place. And they're now like, here's a bus full of people, go do something with them.
What a contrast between now and then. The approach in the military and in the fire service was so hands-on. And I remember reading in Alan Brunacini's book, Fire Command, he talked about the SOP in the 60s and before, and maybe 70s, was that you showed up as a battalion chief, at least on the East Coast. I believe he talked about the East Coast. You go into the fire. You're the first one there, and you're going in, and you're a tactical practitioner at that point. And now it's like, we've learned that that's not the best approach. And of course, we instituted an incident command system, and it's just so much better to have somebody outside coordinating everything, because then, things are safer and even more efficient. But interesting to look back in that history and just to see how people approached things like that,
Yeah, definitely. That's one of the key things. Chief Bernstein was very instrumental in my career as well. Is that making sure I stay as an IC, I stay at the strategic level.
Yeah. Decentralize.
Strategic level, tactical level, task level.
Right.
Keeping those from that perspective of where am I right now? Because if you're anything but strategic, you don't have eyes on the big picture.
Exactly. Yeah, detachment. Detachment is the key word. It's just so important to be detached,
hard.
because it's very hard, and it's easy to get tunnel vision, laser focused on a problem. You need somebody who does physically and mentally take a step back and kind of look around and what other problem sets do I have? What other risks are here? How do I mitigate those risks? What kind of resources do I throw at different problems? You need that resource, but it's interesting to hear this story and then connect that with Alan Brunacini's perspective on firefighting. Prior to the 1970s,
and tying
maybe
that,
even the 80s too.
What we're talking about right now to 2016, the Canyon Fire, is the key takeaway. And it was also a battalion chief who ran crews down in LA County that I had the fortune of getting a hold of a lot of his videos on 8-track cassette, if you believe that. Not 8-track, or a VHS cassette, right?
VHS, yep.
Really dating myself here. But I had this library of stuff, and one of the things he was showing was firefighters watching this fire burn, and he's asking the LA County firefighters, what are they doing wrong and what are they doing right? And it's like, what are you getting at? Well, they're not doing anything. And that was his key takeaway, is sometimes there's nothing we can do. And that's not our nature. That's not the firefighter's nature.
Right.
Adrenaline kicks in. We're trained. We know what to do. We're going to go after it. And when you see fire, you want to go attack it. You want to start engaging it. And to not engage at all is very, very hard. And that's what I had to do in 2016. I literally drove vehicle to vehicle to each of my resources I had assigned. We'd already been in the fight for a while, and the fire hadn't come to us yet. It hadn't reached the road. It was going to come up out of this canyon. It was going to jump over and go into Honda Canyon. Now, this is burning, close to a cantonment area in we call Lompoc Canyon, and Honda Canyon's over the ridge. So I knew it was going to jump and go into Honda Canyon. Hoped maybe we could hold it at the road. It's a major asphalt 2-lane road, but it's near the ridge top too, which is advantageous to us. But when it did make its run, I knew it was going to. It's going to run up these different drainages. And one of our fire stations was in the threat of it. And once it developed and became big, I was like, we need to evacuate that station, as far as let's get all the vehicles out of there, all the personal property, whatever government equipment we think is salvageable. And somebody said, are you serious? I'm like, this is the day we talked about this. We're going to lose this station. It's sitting in a chimney. It's in alignment of the canyon. It's coming up that canyon. So I need to go down and start talking with, we're calling in the Type 3 incident management team, and I'm a part of it. Our deputy is the planning section chief on it. I'm one of the operations section chiefs. But I'm the IC running the incident, and Woody Enos, one of our retired Santa Barbara County, he was the IC. They're all going to be coming in, and we knew we were in for the long haul. But I need to disengage at a strategic level, go down. But I'm not leaving until I briefed every single engine. We don't have an anchor point. We don't have a place we can gauge the fire. It's going to jump the road, and you're going to try and pick it up. Whatever you do, make sure you have an anchor point. Make sure you can fall back to safety, because it's going to jump on again in other places. And there's a high potential you could get trapped. Just make sure no matter what, you're on the edge of the black or you're in a safety zone. So we had a parking lot to a key infrastructure building that we were trying to protect. We had our fire station, which I didn't think we'd be able to protect. And they did. When I came back up, it was a firestorm around the entire station, 50-foot flames all the way around, engulfing the perimeter of the station. And there's a picture of hose. Like, I've never seen a hydrant with so much hose coming off of it. Gated, and an engine and embers are
Just
slamming
doing
against the
everything
building.
they could to protect it.
Yep. Save the station. But again, it was making sure every single firefighter knew we don't have the typical anchor point, flank this fire mentality. It's coming at us. We can't get below it. We can't catch anything. Even if we catch it on the road, you still have fire behind you, so it's going to jump again. So it's going to outflank you. So it's just, we got to hunker down, be safe, and we'll pick it up on our terms. We're not picking it up right now. And those are all the lessons I learned from 77. It's like there was nothing you could do with that fire. There was nothing. Just protect infrastructure where it's safe and get out of its way until the conditions change to make it conducive to fight fire. And that's a tough thing to do because every spot fire that jumped the road, the guys wanted to attack. They wanted to get it, but there could be a spot behind them, a spot alongside them that could have overtaken them. And they did it safely. Nobody was hurt or injured there. But then we fast forward. You want to keep going with 2016 Canyon? Or is there anything else you want to
we can get into it. I do want to, before I forget, highlight that point. I think it might be one of the more important ones that you've brought up today, is that strategic patience, tactical patience even. Like you had mentioned, we have this inclination to want to do stuff. We're doers, we're helpers, right? Like that's why we're in the fire service, and we're trained to be doers and helpers. You see the same thing on the structural side too. You know, maybe going into places that there's no livable space, right? No survivable space, and putting firefighters into positions they shouldn't be in, right? Because we have this, we're protected by ensemble that's rated up to 500 degrees, and we just kind of feel as if we're Superman. We're protected. We have SCBAs and everything else, but it's so important as chief officers, company officers, to really, to study these events and incidents and tell the guys, hey, hold back, pull the reins back on them, because there's especially with wildland fire, like you're not going to compete against 50-foot flames. Like there's nothing that we're going to do. Putting that into perspective, especially with wildland fire, is so important.
Yeah, and I don't know how I would have handled that fire had I not spent all that time along with, I got to give Brandon Page, he's a battalion chief now down in Santa Barbara City. He was my captain. He was instrumental in developing and finding the fatality site and developing the staff ride. He introduced me to Joe Valencia. Joe was writing his book. But had we not spent all that time studying that fire, and then I was posed with that fire, I still think I wouldn't have been hard charging at it and expecting my firefighters to kill it. I had chiefs that I dealt with in the past that were like, we're gonna bring everything we have to bear and we're gonna kill this fire. Well, that was a 77 mentality. It's not a safe mentality. Putting fire on the ground is a very uncomfortable thing if you don't understand the dynamics of doing that. So adding fire, burning things out, some are, and even doing that, you got to be extremely careful. You could get firefighters trying to do that when it's not appropriate. It's a tool and things, and I'm getting into kind of more of the tactical level thing, but that's what's really interesting about this particular staff ride. When we were developing it, Mark Lenane brought that up, the superintendent at the time of LP Hotshots. He goes, this is one of the very unique staff rides that could be a 500 level incident management team training environments, because what do you do when you lose the entire leadership that's running the incident? You lost all strategic leadership. it's gone. Now what? And you have all these resources out there to bear that are some engaged, some still coming. Because there's so many lessons that can be learned off of this incident from that. So everything from task level up to strategic level to a high level 520 incident management type class, the lessons learned from Vandenberg could be learned.
Yeah. It's a good thing you were there in 2016 to impart that wisdom, and you guys worked up, of course, ahead of that, but to be there for that event and to remember those lessons learned from 77 and how it informed your decision-making. It's really incredible how those two connect. So yeah, let's talk more on 2016, whatever else, you like to share, you haven't shared up to this point.
Yeah, I just had a thought too, just to make sure this is put out there is, you talk about Vandenberg being unique, and it's a tough sell to continue to try and sell what we do. It's like, okay, there's Vandenberg again, asking for this, asking for that. It's unique. And because most installations, you can have the same approach to every single installation. So all of our doctrine, everything that the way we do business is based off of that's kind of installation. Then you bring all the complexities we have here, and we are the only, at the time, Air Force Base that did launches. The Cape is contract. So no other fire department, Air Force Fire Department, does launches like we do. So all that unique, 100,000 acres, that's unique. I mean, there's other bases, Eglin, but again, Eglin, different approach. All that vegetation is not the fire department's concern. So being involved and the lessons learned to take it to the whole next level, you asked, like, how did Vandenberg evolve in regards to this? Being involved with those incident, having the crew doing the training, myself and others have taken the time to get certified, qualified to be myself, operations section chief, our deputy chief, plan section chief. We got involved in incident management teams and went out and traveled. We had folks that did base camp manager. It's like, well, why base camp manager? Like, what value is it that for the fire department? Oh, it's hugely instrumental for Vandenberg, because in 2016, we had over 800 firefighters come to help us fight the canyon fire from California and as far away as Florida. NIFC's ordering up resources because it went through the local dispatch to South Zone to NIFC to get us whatever we needed to help put this fire out. It was, I think, the number 3 priority for the nation to put out. So again, even myself, I took a time when I left the crew, one of the few years break from going out on wildfires because I had a kid and son, and most summers I'm fighting fires, so I didn't want to go out. So I got involved in GIS, which was really cool because I got a chance to see the planning section and get a chance to understand that. But we had folks that knew how to do mapping, and that's very instrumental when you're dealing with all of our installation. Mapping is all kind of kept secret to a certain extent. They don't give out all that. Most of it now is, but infrastructure, that kind of stuff. That's important when you're fighting a big fire in 2016 and all the infrastructure that's being threatened. So our departments involved, we were embedded into a Type 3 incident management team, which was really cool. Myself as operations or deputy. So our deputy's called in, he's working the forms in the 209. The 209 is very instrumental in getting you additional resources. So being involved in those teams just opened our mutual aid beyond just the neighboring department. Most bases can deal with just one mutual aid agreement with a local department that helps them, because you get a vehicle accident on the side of the highway or you need them to come in to help you fight a structured fire. You need that. Well, how do you get 800 firefighters from across the nation to Vandenberg? It's through what we have built up, and that's mutual aid agreements with Los Padres. They're our ordering point for massive fires, and we've got mutual aid issues throughout all of DoD right now that does not allow us to go beyond Los Padres anymore. And we're still trying to fix that. It's affecting our crew. It's affecting everything we do and the future of large fires on Vandenberg. We can only get the local resources, what Los Padres can offer and what Santa Barbara County can offer. That's scary, because 2016, it wasn't just what Los Padres or Santa Barbara County could give us. We had LA County. So then anyway, so we had that fire where I go down to our crew quarters. We have a classroom there, and we're building the incident action plan for the next day. And we're bringing in the Type 3 team, what we could, because some of them are already committed. Because even as a Type 3 incident team member, I'm also on a Type 2 incident team, and many of our other members were as well, and they were off on other fire assignments. So we got as many as we could together, got logistics going to get meals and this, that, and the other, and we're ordering a bunch of resources for tomorrow. What does tomorrow look like? We're trying to now create divisions, because normally you get on scene, initial attack, right flank or left flank is Division Alpha, right flank is Division Zulu, and then we create a Division Mike that is out forward looking at what's threatened, and we start anchor and flank at the fire. Well, we weren't doing that in this fire, so we don't even have divisions. We just have firefighters up on a road in front of the fire with the fire burning around them, and they're trying to just pick up the pieces. Never been on a fire like that before. Usually they get there and you're left flank, you're right flank, or you're out. It's a couple days later, and we show up to the fire to help out. So anyway, trying to develop the plan. The Type 3 team. And so the next day we're doing a briefing. At 6 o'clock in the morning, we have a bunch of crews standing out in front of the building. We got a map up on the wall, and we're doing a formal incident briefing, like many of us have seen, with an incident action plan. We're now looking at where the fire's gone. It's already been in Honda Canyon. After I was done with that, I went out, drove up and around the ridge on the other side of Honda Canyon, saw it was down in the canyon. It's like, it's going to come up over the top here tomorrow. So we have the resources the next day. At this point, now I'm operations. Woody Eunice is the IC for the next operational period. And we all get together midday and we run the complexity analysis on the fire. It's far exceeded the Type 3. Type 3 team can handle up to about 300 firefighters, maybe a little more, but logistically supporting that many firefighters is very difficult for a Type 3 team. All the other complexity factors of where the fire was burning, where it was going, how long it would take to put out, all pushed that we need to order an incident management team. So ordered a federal incident management team, Type 2 team. Now we integrated them all together. They're just one team when you go above the Type 3. But we ordered a Type 2 team that brings in minimum 57 some folks, and now they're running the incident on the day 2. So, well, day 3. Day 1 was pretty much late afternoon in through the evening. Day 2 was Type 3 team running it. Fires down in the canyon. It's in 2 canyons. And what I didn't mention is during that night, the next day, I'm not sure the time that the launch, the Atlas, they had an NRO satellite, an NRO National Reconnaissance Organization. That's a military asset, Department of Defense asset, very vital to what we do. Is that Atlas rocket's on the pad? It's supposed to launch tomorrow. So in the middle of the evening, 11:30 at night, the installation commander, we're still Air Force, Space Force had not been created yet. The base commander's asking, are we launching tomorrow? And so to launch, we're not going to engage the fire for 2 hours prior to launch. We're not going to have a single firefighter on it. We can't put the people out that have to be out to where they need to be, because they could be in the fire area to support that launch. So the determination was made to not launch. It wasn't safe because we'd have to leave the fire unchecked for 4 or 5 hours before we can engage firefighters again. We already had probably 3,000 or 4,000 acres burning, maybe less, but I don't remember the exact number at that particular time. But everything was out. There was no containment at this point, 0% containment. Nothing, no lines that were viable were put in that we could say were secure. So the determination was not made to launch. 6 months later, they were able to launch. That we lost that much infrastructure in power lines and this, that, and the other. So now the Type 2 incident management teams come in that night. They took it the next day. So that's a watch out situation that's not really written, but we all in wildland fire is a watch out situation, is that transition, a team transition. So you got a team transition, and for whatever reason, we had a mix of helitack crews and county engines all up on a ridge, and they're going to do a burnout operation to try and keep a portion of fire checked in Honda Canyon instead of going towards that Atlas. It's already in another canyon that's kind of working its way towards the Atlas, and so there's a different division handling that. The Atlas being Slick 3 launch facility. And around the corner, Slick 4, which is SpaceX. They're burning across that ridge. I'm driving out. At this point now, I'm just an agency rep. I'm kind of the liaison between the EOC, and I'm attending all the share takers meetings and all that kind of stuff. I'm just kind of floating through the incident to just to be a Vandenberg rep and such. Or one of our assistant chiefs was unified IC along with the incident management team. So we're letting the incident management team run things, but we're embedded with it. We, at this point, are building up to 800 some firefighters. We have a massive camp, incident command post up on the main cantonment area. And for all of us Air Force firefighters, how do you bring an incident management team into a base, and how does that integrate with your EOC or dispatch and then the CAT, right? Is it still called the CAT, crisis action team?
Yeah, crisis action team, is that?
Yeah, at the base.
Yeah.
That's where the base commander
you're talking
and all
about the base commander,
base
leadership.
commander, all the key people, right? Because they're looking, especially if it was affecting a flight line for a flying base.
They're thinking military operations mission
Their
of the base.
strategic
sustain
mission, right? So strategic mission focus. Well, we have a fire burning that ends up burning 10,000 acres. It burns most of South Vandenberg, right? Like, what does that look like? So you have the CAT still stood up through the 9 days of this fire. You have the EOC stood up. But what do they do when you have an incident management team? What was really, really cool that I saw was the incident commander took one of his liaisons, and the liaison position is an awesome position. So when I was going through all my training, the liaison, what they do for the IC is the IC stays strategic focused to the incident objectives of why they're there. So you're going to have all kinds of distractions to fighting the fire, political distractions, military distractions, right? For us, that's affecting timber. Well, the timber harvester, that company wants to know what you're doing to fight the fire and how is it going to impact their operations and when can they go to work and when. So all those people are coming at you as an IC. Your liaison handles all that. You need to close major roadways, this, that, and the other. The liaison's handling all that for the IC. He embedded one of his liaisons into the EOC. So the liaisons in the EOC, he's hearing what the CAT is concerned about. So when an incident management team takes a fire, they get, this is the list of what our expectations are you as an incident management team. This is what we're giving you as authority to go do and put this fire out. And here's some concerns, environmental concerns, this concerns, military mission, this and the other. Well, a 10,000 acre fire involving commercial space launch, military assets, this, that, and the other. There's a lot of that they're still figuring out. So the EOC is hearing all this from the CAT. Like, we got this building now threatened, these concerns, that building needs to generate. We cannot have no power at that building. So we got to get folks out there to fuel it. We're having our prevention folks escort them into the fire area to make sure that they were able to service that. But what was running is the EOC had a liaison to the incident management team that knew what was going on, what the concerns were of the base, and was able to take it back to the IC, and then they were able to put that into their strategic picture of how they managed the fire. Huge success. So getting back to the fire. So they just took the fire. So your leader's intent, what you're supposed to do in a division, a newly assigned division supervisor just certified, is now probably got one of his most complex assignments he could ever have. And they're going to try and burn out this ridge. There was a captain from Santa Barbara County that was very vocal that you guys need to understand this is not your atypical fire. You're at Vandenberg Air Force Base. There has been a fatality on this base from fires. It burns differently than where it burns inland. We can have fires burning with a higher RH, more extreme than it would 10 minutes from here. So he's trying to articulate all that, and they're burning this entire ridge line. And as the day warms and that canyon is now being filled with all this heat, we go from a very benign, low flame lengths to, and there is if you go to the Lessons Learned Center, or you just do a search, Honda Canyon Fire 2016, you will find a video that tells the story I'm about to tell. So I'm going to keep it short.
Yeah, I'll share that link. I've watched that video yesterday. I'll share that link on our website, firedawg.us, along with this episode, and on Facebook as well.
So I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I want people to go watch it, because I just tell you that I was on the other side of the canyon. I drove up, I looked in the canyon, they're across. I didn't know what they were doing because I didn't have what everybody on the fire is doing at this point. I'm an agency rep, and I'm looking at what infrastructure was damaged. So we had an Indian Chumash painting on the side of this rock that's like, what do you call it? Archaeological site that's very pristine. Was it impacted? Minor impact, but yes. Went up to Trans Peak, very critical peak with communication equipment. It was impacted. So I'm taking pictures. I turn around, and what was just some minor smoke in the canyon, low flame lengths, is now a massive column. the entire canyon's on fire. And we couldn't get off of the ridge. And we had black, we were safe, but we're trying to go from the black to the green to a road to get back out. And we go down the road we came up, and we're not going that way. So we took a different evacuation route that comes off of that, and had to wait a while until things got benign and we were able to drive out. And I was able to go past Slick 6 and seeing it coming down Slick 6. It's now going past the fatality site. I didn't know at this point that we had a whole division worth of folks that are trying to flee for their lives. 2 shelter deployments. Depending on where you were at on that ridge, it was, wow, that got hot quick, to, oh my gosh, I'm in hell. It's pitch black, dead night, embers slamming the sides of the engines. They're all trying to get off the ridge. I'll leave it at that. 2 shelter deployments, smoke inhalation. No, I don't think there were any burn injuries from that, but it was a near miss that changed the lives of some of those people that were affected that day.
There's also a report that will be on the website firedawg.us too that highlights that event. And I remember reading in there that some of the folks, the firefighters that they had interviewed, described their scared level, I guess is the way to say it, is a 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10, that they literally were fearing for their lives. And there are pictures, and if it's okay, I'll share those as well.
Please.
Of the conditions, the visibility conditions. They couldn't see in front of their face because the smoke was...
It was midnight.
And it was dark out. Okay. I know
but it was midnight for them.
It was midnight.
It was hell on earth.
I
It was true. I mean, watching that video, it was I'm trying to say, paint the picture.
No, I understand.
It's hell on earth. They're in midnight conditions, black,
right,
with fire on both sides of them, embers, and it is a sunny, partially cloudy day. When I say partially cloudy, I'm just talking little tiny few clouds in the sky. It's a beautiful day. If you're on North Vandenberg, you can be at the beach and you got people that are on this ridge right now. And that's like hard to comprehend, is that you're like, for them, where they are right now on our installation, they're fighting for their lives. It's hell on earth. It's pitch black, but that's not what the environment around them is. It's a nice sunny day.
Right,
so yeah, so we had a near miss burnover, 2 shelter deployments, no fatalities. I think smoke inhalation was the basically what happened. They were transported. So now the incident management team has to brief that. The lesson learned center folks came out, that they were able to put that together. Thankfully, I was a part of the local cooperators meeting that we had to have, because they called it an investigation. And of course, now you got unions, firefighter unions, like, whoa, stop. We're not doing this. We're not allowing you to interview our folks. An investigation leads to fault.
Right.
So there was that little moment of like, are we going to allow this to happen? So imagine we're trying to deal with this now while we're fighting a fire. And they're like, we apologize that that's the term, but this is... And so thankfully, everybody was willing. And that's where they captured, which has probably never been done before, the level of footage, photographs, interviews that occurred to capture. Everybody was there to put the link you're going to put out for people to watch.
Review, essentially. Yeah.
It's an outstanding after action review of...
It really is.
Capturing, being able to bring us into what they dealt with. Most time you get a picture. Well, a picture doesn't. The videos really.
Yeah, there's videos from engines up there. Yep. Some
people cussing, and you can hear the fear in their voice.
Oh yeah.
So dealt with that, and then again, multiple days of fighting the fire. And I don't know the exact day, but I think it was the next day is when Ryan Osler in a water tender.
Yeah.
So imagine 800-some firefighters. You have camp on base, but then you also have folks that are supporting the Hella base, which is down in Lompoc Airport, which is close to us, but it's not on the installation. So they're a water tender supporting that, and they were staying out in Buellton, and our drive-in, foggy morning in the Lompoc Valley, and a newly constructed roundabout on the edge of town that was a fatality site of multiple vehicle accidents. They built this roundabout. They were coming in, forgot about the roundabout, hit the roundabout, rolled the tender, and Ryan Osler, firefighter, was killed. You would consider that an incident fatality. I mean, it was off the incident. It was in the local community, but still. Highly impressed with, as I learned, peer support, of how the incident management team kind of used those peer support tools. So he was from Ventura County Fire. They brought all of the Ventura County firefighters that were assigned to the incident, because it wasn't just him on that water tender. There were other Ventura County think there was a strike team of engines from Ventura County, I believe, and others. It might have been part of the division soup. I don't know who all was there from Ventura, but they brought them all to one location, briefed them on what was going on, and then released them. Again, there could have been delays. They were quick in how they handled all that. It was very well done, and how the incident management team handled that, rough situation.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
If you got more on the 2016.
Just to kind of close off the 2016 fire. So we have this fire, 10,000 acres, incident management team running it. Those were the key events. So what happened? Did we learn from 77? Yes. Could we had multiple burnovers, this, that, and the other? We didn't have our crew. We literally only had, I think, 3 people on the crew at this point. And much of what the crew had done, I'm digressing, but I'll come back to the fire in just a second. Much of what the crew would have done was brushing roads, making sure some of the access roads that we would have accessed the fire were more survivable, less, where it's safe to be on that road versus you got brush and vegetation high. We probably would have even been able to access the top of the initial attack fire. Because that road was one of the places we trained. We go out and park on the knoll above where the fire started, which was down in the canyon, and we would cut line through the timber because it's the only place on the base that has timber that gives us that feeling that we're up on north, where how do you post a lookout in timber? But we couldn't even get to that point because my plan was let the fire run up to that. Then we can then catch the flanks. I'm hoping to get some air tanker drop and a helicopter drop to kind of slow the fire down. There's issues with that. So it's inaccessible, and we had to wait for it to come to us. But in the course of the next 9 days of fighting that fire, the incident management team, we had 7 other fires on base. Your infrastructure on South, what another one of the uniquenesses of Vandenberg is your NCE. You work on electrical power lines. Well, you work on just the standard one pole to one pole to one pole in a residential area. We have infrastructure that spans the entire base. That's almost like your high voltage long strings. And all that's being impacted. So they're diverting power from one substation to another substation over different lines. And that shift and that additional load going through those lines is stressing those lines. And so we had lines that were burning through insulators or wires that held them to the insulator, and then it drops onto the pole. The pole catches fire, drops. So we had 7 other initial starts. What was really interesting is what caused this 2016 canyon fire. We don't know. There was one theory that was white phosphorus that finally surfaced and got air and sunlight on it, and it just ignited because we have UXOs across the installation. This being Camp Cook, we trained for the Korean War on this base, but it was no hunting because of the Atlas launch. It's not a place that a person would ever hike. You couldn't hike to where that fire started. It was just in a place where you couldn't lob something down there to start a fire. So we don't know what started it. So the base is concerned because what caused this fire? Was it done to, you got to think that way. Was it done to prevent this launch? Well, then they're like, okay, so then we have a fire that now runs through the entire installation, the Washington fire. That was challenging. Oh my gosh. You got half of the not half, because a little less than half, because the night shift is a little less than the day shift, right? So you got the day shifters all in camp, the night shifters out on the fire, and we have this fire within a mile of where all these people are in camp, and they all start getting on their engines and start going to bear on the fire. What do you do when everybody just empties and just dumps on top of you? Then the comm frequencies that they assigned for initial attack weren't working because they were forced frequencies and they weren't hitting the repeater. So what was assigned for initial attack wasn't working. So now we got this fire that was started. I believe it's still considered undetermined, but there was an area where if you drive to work every single day and you smoked, that would be where you flick your cigarette out the window. There were hundreds of cigarette butts in this one area. So somebody that had a routine of smoking would flick their cigarette butts out. We had, which is very, very unique for Vandenberg, during that 9-day period, we had the lowest RHs we would normally ever have, relative humidity, very, very dry conditions. We're near the ocean. Normally our relative humidity is 50 to 80%.
We're talking 15%?
Like in the single digits and 10, 15%. That's when a cigarette butt can potentially start a fire. A cigarette, not butt, but a cigarette could. Most of the time you flick, it's not going to start a fire unless it's tinder dry and there's no moisture in the air. Well, we had very little moisture in the air, and I believe that's what started the fire, but it ran right through the containment area. So we're running, and that's where most of our base infrastructure is, and some of our key infrastructure. One of the missions at Vandenberg that came from Cheyenne Mountain, that building, that mission that came from Cheyenne Mountain that's now in Vandenberg is sitting in the path of this fire. So this fire is raging through eucalyptus groves, throwing eucalyptus leaves. It's going right through the education area, which is our Space Force today, Space Command Training Center. We call it tech schools. Their compound, it's burning through there. Large VLATs, very large air tankers, 747, is dropping retardant right across all these buildings and through our installation. Helicopter, one of our water rescue captains went to the pool, pulled all the buoys out for the lanes so that the helicopter can dip out of the pool to start dropping. We caught that one, I don't remember how many acres, like 100 some acres. Well, what it did is it threw leaf litter way out. And so now they're like, okay, now we had a fire that's ran through the cantonment area. We had a fire that's delayed a launch. Where would they start another fire if somebody were doing this? So we started looking at our infrastructure. Well, it would be this power line or this substation. So now they're watching these areas. 2 days later, some of the leaf litter that was smoldering, and Jesse, our crew superintendent, had picked up multiple fires out in that area that night. He stayed out all night because that's where a bunch of spot fires had occurred. And 2 days later, a fire takes off right near that power line that runs across that area. Again, is this a threat to try and take these power lines out? And then the next day, a fire right next to that substation.
Interesting.
All of them, all but the canyon fire, I can tell you what started the fire, in my opinion. Okay, I mean, again, if they could not prove a cigarette started that fire, but it was likely, right? They leave it as undetermined. But when we got to the fire by the substation, I was initial attack on that with one of our engines. The power lines were hitting the eucalyptus trees that were right next to it, and it was still raining embers down from it touching it. That's what caused that fire. But again, so we postured the installation to feel like we were under threat of an arsonist. It really did. And most of my comments about I know is all hindsight, right? At the time, it's like, wow, this is interesting. 7 starts while we're fighting this. 7 to include the main fire.
Wow, what an incredible series of events. That's got to be probably. Is it one of the worst fires that Vandenberg has seen? The 16. I mean, in terms of the acreage and impact of infrastructure and things like that.
Yeah, since the 77 fire, it's the worst fire we've ever had.
Right.
We've had the Harris fire, which was a huge success. Lesson learned. I was on the crew as crew superintendent. No injuries. Burned 9,000 acres. So not to get too deep in the weeds of fire ecology, but we're in an area where typically fires stay small. It's moist, it's wet with the marine moisture, this, that, and the other. But whether it's salt curing, whatever you want to call it, that allows the grass and vegetation to burn with a higher relative humidity, moisture in the air, it does burn, and it burns. But a typical fire in Vandenberg on a typical day will pick up as a small spot, or it'll run to maybe 500 acres if the wind and topography allow it. That's like a typical fire on Vandenberg.
And the season is how long?
We now say there's never no fire season. It's low or it's high, but it's typically June or May time frame to November, December. Not the first rains, but the first 3 inches of rain.
Spring to fall
would declare kind of over. But the thing about that is, again, not to get too far into fire ecology, but the brush and vegetation does not start taking on moisture as soon as it starts raining. The grasses do when they start growing, right? We get green grass. So your grass fires will stop.
A lot of sustained water, right?
Right.
I learned that in Alaska.
Yeah. So what happens is the brush stays dormant. It's not pulling any moisture. It could rain, and then If the leaf litter and the stuff that's tender dries out, you could have a fire and it burn through brush, but it hits the grass is green and it kind of goes out, right? So if you have a brush field, you could still have in the middle of winter a good couple 100-acre fire if it's all sustained, dried out brush. What happens in the spring when the rains start to die off and the sun starts coming out and it gets warm is now all that brush, like, okay, I'm not going to be dormant. I'm going to suck the water up out of the soil and start flowering and budding. And now the fuel moisture comes up and now that brush is no longer conducive to burning. And then that takes our fire season to where the grasses start to dry out. Now we're going to have fires. Now the fire will burn through the grass and hit that brush that still has a little bit higher fuel moisture, and it just doesn't want to burn as rapidly as it does when it dries out.
Okay.
So that's kind of our fire ecology. But one other lesson I want to just pass on real quick in regards to like our department and what we learned, especially from the canyon fire, is how do you integrate into an incident management team and you got your fire resources, but you still have to then respond to the base, to the rest of your installation. And in the past, we would rotate firefighters one shift to the next shift to put them into that incident. And it was very disruptive to the incident because our roll call 7:30, and now you got the next shift coming on, but the incident's time frame is 6 to 6, briefing at 6, out on the line at 7. And so you're 7 to 7, but you're messing up the entire process. Even if you bring the other shift in early to be there for, and we did, they have to be there for then you're rotating a crew out. Now, what it did is it created a crew for both 24-hour shifts, but this incident clock is 12 hours. Many CAL FIRE incidents are 24, but ours were 12. So what I propose from then on is anytime we have an incident that goes to a type 3 incident, those firefighters that went initial attack, if they're capable to sustain themselves, they're attached to that incident, and the rest of our firefighters just do what they do. And if we can build up a stronger force and put them and assign them to the incident, but they're assigned to that incident like it was off base, and then we keep a force on base like we have a regular department, but maybe it's stripped down a little bit. We have a station closed or whatever. That was a huge change from 2016 in integrating into the incident without the disruption of, the names changed today. And then there's a whole side of this that, we don't need to get into, but how do you fiscally track all this? Who pays? So there's a whole lesson there, and all that has to be tracked. And then when we start doing what we do, it makes it even more complicated. So that was one thing, the lesson learned for us.
Yeah. Gosh, we could talk, I feel like at nauseum about this stuff and the lessons learned. I mean, just incredibly complex events that you don't see on Space Force bases or Air Force bases. And just integrating 800 people and then an incident management team on top of that. And then, just the cyclical nature of an incident and matching that. And then all the military infrastructure and commanders that are concerned about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Incredible stuff. Chief Smith, thank you so much. I want to give you an opportunity to talk about anything else or just mention anything else that maybe you would have liked to mention that you didn't get a chance to, and just give us kind of your final thoughts.
I think in closing, one, I want to highly recommend folks, if this is an area of interest to you, or if you have a wildland, don't read the book. I don't know what order I do it in. Probably read the book, and then I would probably read the book and then watch the documentary. The documentary is more on the human factors and what they experienced. Reading the book takes you deep into much of what I just did the wave tops on. And one other thing is, for senior leaders in fire, one of the things I learned early on, thanks to Chief Tom Stevens, fire chief, that I'm here today as a civilian because of him, taught me is you really have to work with your wing leadership, your base leadership. When you have these special things, you can't wait until, and for any leader, you don't wait until the day the incident happens to get to know the people that you're going to work alongside. The success of the 2016 Canyon Fire is not just a success of the Vandenberg Fire Department. Obviously, it's the mutual aid providers that came to help us, but it's also Team Vandenberg. And that's one of the things I love about working on this installation. We have had some of the best commanders, from our own personal commander, but all the way up to even today our SLID commander, because of the relationships we make sure that we maintain. Chief Stevens taught me, I will capture the new installation commander, now SLID commander, the Space Force, within his first 24 hours, because we may be dealing with another fire that I can't I can't be getting to know him and what his expectations are when I have the incident. I got to
Right.
brief him on that threat.
Yeah.
So, but that's even, it's not just commanders, it's your finance folks. It's, all these folks, those relationships and partnerships we have with them. When this happened, they all have to integrate in with the finance folks for the incident and learn how to do that. And the integration, the EOC to, not many installations will experience large catastrophic events that test your ability to understand and utilize the ICS system. But I think what plays the most is relationships.
Certainly.
Is, the relationships we have through our mutual aid, through our involvement in incident management teams with our local battalion. I mean, I know all the local battalion chiefs. I know the local fire chiefs. Knowing them not the day we need them, but just maintain that relationship is huge. And that's something that we've been very successful at.
Yeah, great lesson, sir. Daughter screaming in the background, if you can hear. Yeah, so it's so unique with military commanders. So they're equivalent to city managers and mayors, right? But
Exactly.
they don't have. I mean, they know how to lead. They're not incapable people, but it's different than being a mayor or city manager, right? They're worried about military missions and executing them. So getting them right when they start and kind of driving home those expectations and the history of
Yep.
the base and the kind of complexities that Vandenberg presents or any kind of base presents. It's just a great point on establishing those relationships early and so that they can understand what responsibilities they have under their command. So,
and one of the challenges being a chief officer is understanding the dynamics of changing from that tactical level focus on your folks and their ability to do their job to the strategic level that's beyond the fire, right? For me to know that the SLID commander's number one concern on this installation is assured access to space. In our current world climate, that's extremely important for our national defense that we continue to be able to have that capability here at Vandenberg. And if I didn't know that as a chief officer and I'm trying to go out and execute and I'm losing that vision, and that's the importance of it. And every installation has its uniqueness, and that's a part like what you were saying, getting to know the commanders and understanding, because your strategic objectives when you're fighting a fire is, we're going to contain it to this box, right? And we're going to protect this infrastructure. But this is something that is the utmost of our concern. People first, obviously, but the mission.
You highlighted an excellent point. It's a two-way relationship too. So I think that maybe we can sometimes in your respective functional area of responsibility for us, the fire service, no matter what you do, you kind of get tunnel vision within that function. You think that it's the most important thing, and it's not that it's not important, but there are a lot of other demands that those commanders are in charge of. And so understanding their perspective and the demands that they're up against, the pressures that they're up against is going to help you communicate the message, shape the message in a way that they understand, but also appreciate the other demands that they're up against too. So.
Yeah. And if you're one of those chiefs that are dealing with an incident at your base that's affecting something, sometimes those phone calls that are coming to installation commander are coming from the Pentagon or even the White House. Exactly. And that's amazing to me to know that I'm on a fire, and I've been on several fires on the base where we knew phone calls were coming because is this infrastructure still intact?
Well, Chief Smith, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today and sharing the 1977 and 2016 fires and the capabilities of Vandenberg. Thank you for the body of work. Thank you for everything that you poured into this and the fact that you're willing to share it. I mean, we need folks like you to do these kind of things so that we can remember those lessons and apply them to future incidents, and not just for wildland fire at Vandenberg, but for any kind of structural or other all hazard response that we have. I really appreciate what you've put into this and sharing it on the podcast today.
Well, thank you. Thank you for reaching out, because again, it's been a career work with many partners, like I mentioned, through the podcast to make this happen. But for me, it's been my passion, and I definitely want to share it. I don't want these lessons ever lost. And when I say the lessons, they're beyond Vandenberg. They are totally beyond Vandenberg. And I hope I articulated that well and its value added to some of the other chief officers and even fire chiefs out there that may have to someday deal with a large scale incident, that some of the lessons that we learned and how we did it will help them through that. Thank you.
Well, thanks again, Chief. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you.
All right. Bye. If you've enjoyed this conversation, you can find this episode and many more on our website, firedawg.us, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also follow along with us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn at the FireDawg Podcast. That is the FireDawg Podcast. This episode was supported by Roll Call Coins, telling the story of fire departments and teams through premium custom challenge coins. Learn more at rollcallcoins.com. It was also supported by AOS Services, helping fire departments stay mission ready with worldwide firefighting equipment compliance. Find out more at aosservicesinc.com. If you like what you're hearing, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you found value in this conversation, consider sharing it with a friend, a coworker, or someone around the firehouse. This is Matt Wilson with guest Mark Smith. Until next time, stay safe.